Hello friends, welcome back. So, this is going to be quite a special video. I have spent quite a long time writing quite a lot about this weapon, so as a result this is going to be a very info-packed video, so I would like it, if you do have any opinions or things to share, you keep it towards the end, because I'm hopefully be able to discuss the entire thing over the length of this video. But anyway, let's move on. Hello, welcome back. So, it is time. What is it time for? Well, it's time for something that I've been putting off for a little while, like the Deadringer one. However, this one, I thought I would give it an extra little bit of time to just kind of sit in the cooker. So, yeah, you might have noticed that I've been doing the Talkie series over the last couple of months. Some reason, haven't done the ambi. What's up with that? Yeah, it's because they, said they were going to nerf it, so I didn't just want to talk about it and then have it done. I knew I'd have to wait for it to come out, wait for changes, wait for people's opinions to develop, and then I can have a proper chat. So today, we're going to sit back, we're going to take you across a nice little story. I'm going to be your guide for today, talking about one of my, probably my favourite weapon in TF2, now the kunai maybe, but come on, sit down, grab yourself a hot chocolate, and we will take you back across the years and talk about the Ambassador in Team Fortress 2. So to begin, cast your mind back millions of years ago to the very ancient era of 2009, 8 years ago. Valve were releasing a sniper update. It was all looking pretty great and cool. And then, on day 4, they were like, oh, whoa, it's actually the spy versus sniper update. Oh, exactly, yeah. A lot of the weapons were making sniper pretty strong, like the Razorback, which at the time weighed you down, but prevented backstabs, and the Huntsman, which meant that snipers could just run around the map and do 360 damage, but this also meant that they weren't standing, with their back against the two fort battlements. They were actually running around like a normal person, meaning that the normal counter of spy wasn't very acceptable anymore. This was all great, hooray, sniper's strong, yay, he's more than just sit on the bats and do nothing. On day 6 though, spy got his cool new unlock, his first unlock, whoa. And, all of the first unlocks, they added, like the Deadringer, some odd weapon that gave you super armor and feigned death. Cloak and Dagger, which is literally just a yellow Casio F921W. And most importantly, the Ambassador, which was labelled as the new hand cannon. Whoa, yes, it must be super strong. I'm sure everyone was thinking. Think again, it did mini crits. And for some reason also shot through gates and used the projectile hitbox or something for a bit, but then they fixed that. Anyway, it did mini crits. And in the time that it took you to aim or miss every shot, you could have just body shot them a bunch with a stock and then spy crabbed away. So it wasn't really that great. It was a bit of a novelty because, first unlock for spy, it was the first thing other than sniper that could do headshots, I think. It was just cool. And for some reason also went through players, like the Machina, which was pretty cool to think about, but I'm pretty sure a 50 to 60 damage headshot isn't really that useful beyond like 2 fort battlements where there's a bunch of snipers in a row, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. Mostly the fact that it just did mini crits. It did about 50-60 damage at most ranges. It was not that great. And then, literally less than a week later, after everyone said, that's kinda shit, Valve changed it to do crits on headshot, and this was really broken. Guess why? You could headshot without the cooldown. Meaning that you could just hold the left click in front of a buffed 450 health heavy, do about 510 damage in about 3.5 seconds. This was very broken. So about a month later, June 2009, they changed it to have a cooldown between headshots. 0.95 seconds, just under a second. And that's where it sat, pretty much unchanged for 8 years. Pretty long old time. You click for a headshot, then it's very inaccurate for a second, and then you can headshot again. The body shots do less damage, and for the most time, it was quite appreciated. Some people liked it, some people didn't, but for the most part, it sat in pretty much the same spot for the last 8 years. Now, again, over the years, as you can expect from an achievement item, a lot of new players started to use it, and only it. Possibly because of the new player mentality of stock is bad. So, for the most part, it was kinda not really that big of an issue. You'd occasionally look at the kill feed and see someone do a headshot and be like, whoa, nice dude. But beyond that, it wasn't really much of an issue. A bunch of people in competitive liked to use it, because over the years, fully overhealed Razorback snipers started to leak into the world, and the only real counter was either another sniper or the spy using the ambu. So regardless of if the spy even liked using his gun, he'd often run it just to deal with, or at least break the overheal on Razorback snipers. It also looked really cool in frag videos, so occasionally occasionally you'd see stitched together videos of people's entire, like, 8-week-long seasons of Highlander condensed entirely into, like, a 3-minute highlight video. And you'd be like, oh, wow, I didn't know people could do that. And for the most part, it just kind of sat there. People would either have it equipped because it was an achievement item and they didn't really care about their gun, or because they thought it looked kind of cool to kill people with. Now, eventually, Valve brought around a nice, big old update in 2013, which I fondly remember as the very nice summer update that made a bunch of shit weapons not shit. And also the Saharan Spy's Silent Deadringer was very broken, haha, and they got rid of, polycount sets and stuff. Now anyway, the main takeaway here is that the update essentially added another gun to Spy. It made the L'Étranger from a, oh nice, I can get a tiny ammo pack of cloak per shot for less damage, to, holy shit, I can actually traverse the entire globe, invisible with this thing. This was when they added in the 40% cloak duration, which was really big. For a long time, many spies never really cared too much about their gun, as you've probably seen from pubs, from all the spies attempting to, like, rear their young at the top of staircases, or disguised as scout outside of your spawn waiting to backstab the next person who crosses spawn limits without looking both ways. So anyway, Valve was essentially adding in a, hey, you don't like using your gun, so here's something to put in that slot that makes you playing Spy properly even better. It was a really big deal. You'd start seeing a lot less people spamming and missing 6 ambassador shots, and a lot more of nothing at all, because they were running around with extended cloak meters. Anyway, this was kind of interesting for the ambassador, because the few people that could consistently do good stuff with it had already spent thousands of hours practicing because there wasn't really an alternative, and therefore were already good with it, while the new players to the scene, or those who had already not been bothering to use their gun, were not really worrying about practicing game because there was something to fill in the slot for free, the L'Étranger. This meant that you had a weird split of players. You had those that were either already invested in aiming and didn't want to give it up for a cloak bonus, or the ones who just wanted to go and poke stuff, so immediately switched over to the L'Étranger. The new L'Étranger was an easy mode for a lot of people, as it removed a lot of planning that came with the Invis watch, like ammo conservation, just let you go wherever you want, as fast as you wanted to be. It also kind of made the cloak and dagger's use of you'll get there eventually a lot less prominent. At the time, the cloak and dagger couldn't pick up any ammo. You had to either use the L'Étranger to pull ammo back or just wait forever, so it was quite slow, quite boring for a lot of people. This was fine though, because the mechanic you had to rely on to use the L'Étranger was backstabs, which, from other people's perspectives, wasn't changed by the enemy spy using a different gun, so it wasn't exactly more annoying to play against. It just meant that you were taking less random, 18 hit points of damage, and you're having to be a little bit more careful about spies because they could run around without having to pick up weapons or ammo packs. Think back, previously when you killed a player, it didn't drop an ammo pack on the floor, it just dropped the weapon, so occasionally you'd see flamethrowers and miniguns disappearing and you'd be like, okay, there's a spy around here. Less so of that with the L'Étranger, because they didn't even need to pick up ammo. Now anyway, back to the ambassador, or really, onto the Deadringer, because this is important. Over the years, as I'm sure you might know, this yellow boy has been through quite a lot of changes, probably among the most for any weapon in the game. It's also had a lot of bugs attached to it, but just quickly run over the mechanics of it. At launch, it let you press right-click, absorb 90% damage, run around for about 6.5 seconds, this could be extended by picking up ammo while invisible, and then suddenly pop out of nowhere and go bzzzt really, really loudly. That was the weapon. Over the years, little things were changed on it, little things like the amount of cloak you use when you pop it or put it away, how long the super armor lasts in relation to time spent invisible, taking damage, removing your cloak, etc. But for the most part, its core mechanics stuck. That is, until 2015, around 7 years after the Deadringer's release, where it got its first major shake-up. Less resistance, chilly afterburn removal, and most importantly, it let you run very fast at incredibly high speeds. I've talked about this more in detail in the Deadringer video, which you should watch, but just to quickly summarize it, the weapon became very, very accessible to new players, and it became incredibly easy to abuse. It's quite hard to track an invisible spy who can run across the whole map in half a second. This had a knock-on effect to the ambassador. Oh god, he's talking about the main point of the video again. Hooray. Now, as I've said, not many people bothered spending thousands of hours learning how to aim consistently with the ambassador, enough that you could run it over the revolver and do as good or better anyway. Those that did, at least in Europe, used the invis at the start. Most people hated the Deadringer in competitive, as they all saw it as feign death, not damage resistance. There were a couple of big smart men around the world who realised that you could put them together. I'm mainly going to be talking about Inso though. This was a man who played TF2 Premiership Highlander, and for some seasons of Prem, absolutely trashed over every other spy who played, and a big part of this was A, he was ridiculously good with the Ambassador, and B, he was smart enough to play Spy and Highlander without the Invis watch. This had quite a big knock-on effect on competitive at the time, and people started to notice that the Deadringer was actually usable, and in the right hands, pretty stupidly powerful compared to the old Invis watch. It paired really well with the Ambassador, which more and more people would start to practice with, like Solid, who I think was taught by an older spy called Lenny, Polar of Viljak, who plays Osu, and over the last few years, Toast, who is a Danish man that really likes Ricky Gervais. Now anyway, to most people who are aware of competitive, the Ambassador started to become a playstyle of its own. Instead of being a weird backup tool that no one really used outside of, shit, I've missed my backstab, or a rarely used unlock of, Sniper took 100 push, it became, due to the rising popularity of, holy shit, that man looks cool, look at those logs and headshots and shit, a cool thing to use. All the hip kids were using it, a lot more people started practicing with it, and it wasn't too long before it trailed down to pubs, where Highlander spies and just people who wanted to feel badass in general, would run rampant with the DR and the Ambi combo, knocking down Gibbous engineers and Manco Cap Pyros alike, with this realised to be combo. It wasn't the only gun you could use with the Deadringer, of course. There were people like Hard and Kazul who stuck to using the revolver to its strength in Premiership, Hard specifically being a purely DM-focused spy, as opposed to the pick-and-choose kind of style, and himself trashing Prem in his own special little way, with the stock revolver emphasis. It was just that, to a lot of people, the Ambassador seemed like some big dream of, oh wow, if I was the best at aiming, it's the best gun in the game, theoretically. I could kill any player I could see just by having him on my screen. For a lot of people, this would never really be the case, as things like, oh, that scout is scattergunning me, so my aim is spiking up and I can't hit him, or, oh, he moved slightly, would always be an issue. But for the most part, it was fine. People who were aware that it was too inconsistent to be better than the stock would stick to the revolver. People who just wanted to stab stuff would use the Deadringer, and the rest would use the Ambi, either in hopes that they would look cool running around headshotting stuff as if it was nothing, or because they liked the idea that if they practiced with it, it'd be really good. To shortly bring it back to the Deadringer, this watch has changed over the years to become easily abusable, caused a lot of, fair controversy. People had always been, pretty annoyed about how the fact that you killed a spy often meant that they weren't actually dead. It would make you feel like you were robbed of a kill, or that you had now an annoying task of tracking down a spy. But when the speed boost was added, another layer of annoyance joined it. It became a lot harder / a lot more boring to track down spies now because they could just hop across the map, rather than predictably running to the nearest ammo pack, and with this, spies would often be carrying the Ambassador in attempts to feel like a hip young man doing them headshots, or just to practice with it. Valve noticed this, of course, and roughly 3 months ago, gave out some patch notes, which they wanted community feedback from. It came with a well-deserved Deadringer nerf to make it less accessible, but alongside it, a controversial change. A nerf to the Ambassador to add in random bullet trajectory, meaning that when you click, there's a chance it'll miss, or when you miss, there's a chance it'll hit. Up until this point, I, and most people have asked, have never really had any complaints about the Ambassador. Everything tended to be mostly around how annoying the Deadringer was to play against. All of a sudden, however, with Valve adding in some patch notes, there starts to be waves of very angry people, yelling and saying all these nasty things about everyone who used the Ambassador. I've been making TF2 videos for a very, very long time, and literally 100% of the negative comments I've ever heard about the Ambassador have come in the last couple of the weeks, and the majority of them accompanied with a very rude insult or some excuse about why they suddenly hate the weapon. A commonly thrown around one is, Spy was never intended to be the sniper class. This is a fair point. He is a spy. He and the sniper are both pick support classes intended to pick off individual targets. That's fair. What they fail to mention is that there's dozens more weapons in the game that break this clause of only snipers should deal that much damage at long range. I have yet to see any comments or Reddit posts about people about how the medic's crossbow can do 75 at max range on a body shot with a projectile, or how the flare gun does 90, or the demo's pipes doing 100 with no damage fall off, at any range you can hit the pipes on. I've especially heard very few comments specifically from the people who are outraged about the Ambassador doing 102 at long range, who are also apparently seem to be perfectly fine with the Diamondback, because it gets its headshot damage from sapping and backstabbing things, rather than clicking on a tiny moving headbox. Plenty of people who are sad about the Ambassador nerf were also annoyed that the Diamondback is left in its current state, as it feels, to most, as a really cheap mechanic of which its minor risks of you do a bit less body shot damage is horrendously outweighed by its reward of backstab an engineer and sap all his buildings, and then you can do 500 damage whenever you need it. Now anyway, back to the present. Valve, fortunately, changed their minds in adding RNG to the Ambassador, a mechanic which most people seem to agree would not have been a fitting nerf. And instead, they changed a rather special part about the gun: its range. They claimed, alongside their post, that people were often expecting to see a sniper in their desk cam, but would often see a spy with a revolver. Their goal to fix this issue was to reduce the effective combat range to something more reasonable and expected with the spy. This change, by itself, doesn't sound too unreasonable. If people are complaining that they're dying too much to something they feel is unavoidable, make it harder for that to happen. The changes they ended up adding, however, go far and beyond that goal. They added a maximum range to crits, so that after 1,200 hammer units, it would simply do 18 damage, and B, they added fall off to the crits, meaning that within that boundary, you would do less and less damage the further away you were than target. Now, without context, this was rather hard to decipher. If you haven't seen it though, I posted a short 2-minute clip where I tested this new range and damage, and to the surprise of a lot of people, 1,200 units isn't very much. Some comments said that they were expecting something more like the length of 2 fort battlements, or at least the length of the bridge on Badlands. What we got instead was the ability to do normal, 90 to 100 damage, at close range, and at mid-range around 50 to 60 damage. Beyond little over the length of 2 forts bridge, however, you would just do body shot damage, regardless of where you aim. This change sparked a lot of controversy. From my experience, and nearly everyone I know who previously used the Ambassador full-time, the range where you would now do any damage with the Ambassador was the range where the old revolver was already outshining the old 102 at any range Ambassador. The trade-off over the last 8 years has been that yes, while you can technically hit 102 damage across a battlements at a rocket-jumping soldier, the downside was that you had to hit a tiny moving hitbox, and also deal with issues like shitty networking code causing players to jitter or miss all your normal shots. For a long time, if you managed to backstab a demoman and then immediately get 2 close-range headshots on his medic, you were considered to have gotten a really cool frag, which most people would have trouble getting. In close range, getting a double headshot on a pyro chasing you, shooting with his shotgun to spike your aim, or catching up to you with a power jack, was considered difficult to pull off. Most of your less than Highlander as Gunspy were either to a pyro leaving his combo to chase you, leaving them open to soldier bombs, or for him to send a Mad Milk scout after you to meat shot you to death. Any time you could beat this scout in a one-on-one situation was considered a big achievement. Scouts have a lot of mobility, they deal a lot more damage, they have the ability to hit you far easier than you could without having to try to aim at a tiny, angry, jumping scout head. This is the range where the current Ambassador does revolver damage on a tiny hitbox, with poor body shot damage, and also only being able to take the chance for a headshot once a second. With the stock, it's far easier just to spam body shots at the scout and kill him in 3 hits, which a lot of players who have stuck with the Ambassador for a long time are now realising. Previously, in a one-on-one DM situation with an angry scout or pyro, was considered a difficult victory for the spy, requiring you to be calm, take aim, and hit a good shot twice without any room for error. Now, with more people starting to use the stock, people have noticed that you don't have to worry about any of this. Hitting 3 to 4 body shots on a pyro is almost no effort at all in comparison. The hitbox is around like 14 times bigger for a body shot than a headshot, and with a revolver you don't even have to wait for a cooldown. You simply have to track their general movement and aim roughly for the middle to win almost every 1v1 battle. This is a point which I hope you find fair. The weapon's close-range capabilities have always been outshone by the revolver, in that one takes much more precision and much more timing to do what the other one could essentially just do effortlessly. The Ambassador's place to shine was not within this range, however. It came in 2 parts, as a previously spoken utility gun, and at the top end of player skill as a miniature sniper rifle. The first part of this strength is something that few players take issue with. As I spoke before, Razorback snipers have always been an issue, and the Ambassador was a nice little counter to it. Without too much practice, most players could consistently take down or seriously wound any camping sniper, speeding up the game and allowing their team to push without having to wait for one team to win the sniper v sniper duel. An alternative viewpoint to this strength is dealing with engineers camping in corners. A sap on his sentry, followed by a headshot and a body shot on the unmoving statue of an engineer, would often let most players take out a sentry nest in under 2 seconds, without having to wait for other explosive classes to arrive, or without having to get a backstab or 3 revolver hits before someone else arrives to help. Not many people had issue with this either, as camping engineers have always been considered a pain, and this gun was a possible counter that had been around for also many years, alongside the usual, just spam stickies or rockets to wipe the nest out. Now, the second part of this strength is what I believe to have caused this controversy. The majority of the recent negative comments about this gun have claimed that the Spy should not be able to headshot at long range, and that the nerf to make it a close-range gun is fair. I've already discussed that the Ambassador is outshone in close range by the revolver, making the gun fairly useless now, outside of dealing with Razorback snipers in very close range, an issue which, mind you, has been dealt with by Valve nerfing the Razorback out of competitive usage by removing his ability to be overhealed when he's got it equipped. This nerf, making the Razorback less important, has removed the main useful alternate utility for the Ambassador, because what is the use in equipping a worse primary to deal with another class when that other class will almost never be running that unlock in the first place? Now anyway, back to the long range issue. Over the last 8 years, again, the Ambassador has always had its long-range capabilities. It was considered for a very long time to be balanced, if slightly weaker alternative to the stock revolver. If you go back to any old Reddit discussion thread about weapon balance, you'll often see the usual few weapons appear. The gunboats, you sacrifice damage from ability. The flare gun, you sacrifice consistent damage for a single high burst damage. And the Ambassador, you'd often see weapons like, the Boston Basher and the Jag thrown in because they don't give their respective classes too much of a change compared to stock. But my point is that the main weapons of gunboats, flare gun and Ambassador each change that slot significantly for the downside of consistency and reliability. The majority of Ambassador users have for a long time faced the issue of, I would like to headshot that player across the map. However, it's hard to hit a tiny, moving hitbox. This was the main balance point of the Ambassador. While it had the capability to, at the top end of Spy's skill ceiling, be a long-range hand cannon, the reality of the situation was that it was never really that. To most players, hitting a headshot outside the range of 2-4 battlements is an amazing thing, something to be proud of. Few manage to practice enough that they can hit these headshots consistently, and those that have tend to stay out of pubs and play competitively. Of course, they might still occasionally play in pubs, but for the most part, 99% of the players you meet using the Ambassador would whiff most shots with it and essentially be wasting a lot of their own time spamming across the map, where if they'd just been using the Invis Watch, they could have been doing a lot more actual, real damage to your team. The point I would like to make here is that the Spy used to have a tremendously high skill ceiling. Among the best spies in the world, people with thousands of hours of practice and tens of thousands of kills in their strange ambassadors were considered to have really good aim. Unlike Sniper, who has the ability to scope in and make head hitboxes appear far larger in their viewport, spies would have to aim a tiny few dozen pixels and time the shot every second to have any utility at all. The majority of players, as I've said, were not like this though. They were ordinary people. Out of the people who sat across the map spamming the Deadringer and the Ambassador, most of them would have spent their time much more constructively, as you might have seen from the update, learning to abuse the Invis Watch's capabilities to the fullest. Instead of their team's Spy being seen as oh, he's annoying, but at least he hasn't killed anyone lately, they're becoming an actual threat again, especially with the new Eternal Reward buff. I've started to see way more spies in pub reach the MVP board now that they're spending their time productively, getting train stabs with the or infiltrating medic healing rituals with the Invis Watch than ever before. I was very used to seeing 1 or 2 spies in the team always sit on the bottom of the scoreboard, and more often than not, I would have just run past them that game and noticed them trying to practice with the Ambassador, standing still. The Ambassador nerf, overall, has almost been a buff for the Spy, as weird as it is for me to say. The weapon was something which took a very long time to get good with, and during that time, the spies practicing would often not be accomplishing anything for their team, as the goal was to improve themselves in the hopes of closing in on that skill ceiling, knowing that as they approach it, the gun would start to feel incredibly satisfying and rewarding to use, as those thousands of hours would feel like they finally paid off. The nerf, resulting in the Ambassador no longer having this ceiling, has meant that there's no longer anything to strive for on that end. There is no reason to spend thousands of hours on end shooting rocket-jumping soldiers on Badwater, or learning the choke points on Upward where snipers live on. All that time, which was spent doing very little beyond personal improvement, has suddenly become available to spend being immediately useful. Spy, at its core, compared to the Ambassador, is far easier to do good with. A single backstab on a medic can stop an entire push, and only relies on the Spy's good sense of timing, sometimes a sprinkling of luck that their team doesn't turn around. The Ambassador Spy might have spent several failed attempts at killing the medic, not really doing much on any of the attempts, but eventually he'll get that satisfying pick, and feel like he's achieved what felt difficult for so long. The Knife Spy knows that he can get that pick almost every single time, without any effort on his end. All he has to do is aim for a giant projectile hitbox on the player and click when they're looking the other way. the amount of practice you can now put into Spy is halted. It's very easy to achieve what most people has considered plateauing in skill on Knife Spy. While the name is very deceptive, it holds some truth. There is only so much practice you can put into hitting backstabs on people outside of competitive, and even within, the main thing which separates a top-prem Knife Spy from a high-division Spy is game sense. This is something which is completely unrelated to mechanical skill, mostly, and is simply gained from playing against good players and learning from your own mistakes. Revolver aim can only go so far, as well. The difference between a player who can hit 3 out of 6 shots and the player that can hit 5 out of 6 shots means very little in reality, as those shots that do hit will almost always kill the target anyway, and the difference in time is less than a few seconds. I've been talking for a while now, so I think it's a good time to summarise. My final point, my final entire point about the video, is that I'm sad. I'm sad that Valve has essentially removed one of Spy's unlocks from the game. I'm sad that there's no longer anything to mechanically strive for on Spy before a few hundred hours. I'm sad that there's the only true viable way to play Spy now relies entirely on melee hit registration. Most of all, I'm sad that people have suddenly, really recently, become annoyed that Spy has a high skill ceiling. I am more than willing to bet that the majority of these nasty comments, these painful remarks that seem to state every Spy I come across kills me instantly across the map, and there's nothing I can do about it, come from just wanting to fit in with popular opinion. I feel like the negative comments from players who are used to playing against Premiership and Platinum Spies who can hit those shots are warranted. They're used to seeing those thousands of hours of practice and that they can pay off, but on the flip side, they should expect it. If you're playing in the top division of your competitive league, why should you be worried that the player you're fighting is good? I can understand, more than anybody, that the Deadringer is annoying and frustrating and easy to abuse and boring to play against, as its core mechanic is very baseline. There is almost no skill in using the Deadringer, for the most part, so most players use it in the exact same way, making it very much appear just everywhere. The Ambassador, though, I don't think it's like that. It's not easy to use, it's difficult, it takes a long time to practice with, and if you take down a player at long range, it's rewarding, as you had to practice and be patient with no room for error. I bet that anyone finds themselves dying a lot to pub spies with the Ambassador, that they're going out of their way to chase this one spy who would otherwise be useless, making their movement very predictable and often running in a straight line. The counter to most Ambassador spies was really simple. You just had to move slightly. The difference between headshotting a target running slowly in a straight line and one who occasionally moves to the side is immense, and results in the chance of being hit rising up in difficulty to tremendous levels. Anyway, I hope this video has brought you some insight into my thoughts on this weapon, this thing that I, myself, have put thousands of hours into, and myself selfishly. It's my own biased opinion, I understand. I'm upset that these hours have essentially just feel wasted now, as I can accomplish the exact same thing with the new Ambassador with the stock revolver, but with a lot less effort, and with it, a lot less satisfaction. If you still consider yourself happy with the changes, or upset that the Ambi had long-range capabilities, tell me. Properly, write an actual comment, describe why you feel like this, and maybe give an example if you've got one. Far too many of the comments recently about the Ambassador have quite literally just been, it's unpopular now, you smelly man, without any proper body to it. It makes me think, truly, that the majority of unhappy players are just following popular demand and deciding that they too want to fit in and dislike the weapon. And before I leave you, might I quickly mention that the diamond rank is completely unchanged during the update and still rewards cross-screen 102s for body-shotting players once you've backstabbed a few people. This video has been quite different for me, so do let me know what you think. I don't usually go off like this or write long scripts, but this has been quite a big deal for me, so I felt like it was quite important to speak about it properly. But anyway, thank you for watching, as always, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.